Welcome to Addiction in the Family, episode 74, Sharing and Healing Without Shame with Donna Marston. All right, we have a great show for you today. Spent some time getting to sit down and talk to author and mother Donna Marston, who went through a lot with her own son's addiction, thinking she might lose him, but then he did find recovery, but more importantly, along the way, she discovered she could find her recovery. Not only that, but she has gone on now to write books and give talks and meet with a lot of parents and help them recognize where they can move through this journey by focusing on themselves rather than focusing on trying to get their loved one better, get their loved one to change. It's a really great conversation. Looking forward to sharing it with you right after a word from one of our sponsors. Addiction in the Family is brought to you in part by Windmill Wellness Ranch, where I happen to work. We are nestled in the beautiful hill country of Texas, and we've been rated as the #1 treatment center in the United States by the Track 9 independent rating system. And that's based on our ability to bring down addiction relapse rates, anxiety, depression, and also increase optimism, increase resilience, increase people's commitment to recovery. When you see the results, that's what counts. Now, we are so confident of our ability to help people that we offer the Windmill Guarantee. The Windmill Guarantee states that if somebody comes to treatment and does all the stuff that we suggest, and then also does all the follow-up that we suggest, and still needs to come back to treatment within 1 year, they can come back at no cost. If you want to find out more about the Windmill Guarantee and everything else that we have to offer, visit windmillwellnessranch.com or call our admissions line. While I've got your attention, we also offer a free family course to anybody. You don't have to have any association with Windmill, but if you wanted to get a taste of what we offer for families, sign up for a family course at windmillfamilycourse.com. You'll get weekly emails that'll point you towards podcast episodes, blog posts, videos, all kinds of resources that we offer for families. Because as you can imagine, I'm kind of passionate about family work, and I happen to run the family program at Windmill Wellness Ranch. So if you want to see more about that, go to windmillfamilycourse.com and spread the word. Again, anybody, anywhere who needs what we have to offer is free to sign up for the course and get those resources. All right, welcome back. Without further ado, let's have that interview. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So glad to have you here. And take a moment, introduce yourself to our audience, and let us know, what are you doing on a show called Addiction and the Family?
Hi. Well, thank you for having me on, Casey. So my name is Donna Marston, and I am a mother who knows the pain of navigating a child's active addiction. I spent years of dealing with my son's addiction for about 10 years. All of the nightmare, all of the hard things that I had to go through that, like every other parent goes through, I ended up with a mission. And my mission is to provide resources and guidance to help other parents navigate, or family members, or anybody actually, navigate through the challenges of loving somebody in active addiction.
And God bless you for taking that mission on. I resonate with that 100%. This is a huge passion of mine, is working with family members and just helping people understand what they can do, what they didn't do that maybe they thought they did, or all the second guessing that people do naturally around these things. And if you don't mind, just maybe tell our audience a little bit about your story and what led to that mission.
So when my son was about 15, the mother's instinct, something's wrong. What's going on with him? It was 5 years before I really figured it out. And when I did find out that my son was in active addiction, he was an IV heroin user at the age of 17, started with cannabis at 15. It brought me to my knees, and I went to bed for 6 months when nobody was looking. And I wasn't emotionally healthy for anybody who was healthy. I was so driven to rescue him from his addiction and from that lifestyle that I lost myself. And so 2 years before he found his recovery, so in 2006, I hit my enough. And somebody had given me this book, and I was like, I am so sick of self-help books and, all that stuff. But she goes, well, just go to this one page, go to page 134. And it was an emotional scale. And when I saw it, it was 1 through 22, and I was number 22. I was full of despair. I was depressed. I was living in dysfunction that I didn't even realize I was doing. And all this stuff hit me like a 2x4, that something has to change, and he's not going to change, and it had to start with me. And so at that point, just baby steps I started to work on getting better, and I educated myself about addiction because I didn't have a clue what I was dealing with, even though I grew up in the 60s and 70s, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all that good stuff. But I didn't grow up around it. So it was very different. The mission found me. I didn't find the mission. I had reached out to some people in New Hampshire, and they sent me on this recovery mission up in Vermont at a farm camping. And like, I don't usually do stuff like that. And it was all people in recovery. I was the only mother. And every day we would have to hike up this mountain, and we would go and we'd meditate and we'd learn mindfulness and all kinds of stuff. And then we all made a commitment of what we were going to bring back to our state. And my commitment was, I'm going to bring back family support because there was nothing for me. There was Al-Anon, but to be honest, I wasn't ready for that. My ego was too big. My kid's not like yours, because denial is a beautiful thing. Yeah. And so when I came back, I founded Family Sharing Without Shame, and I ran that for over 12 years. And then COVID hit. Now I do it nationally via Zoom. It just has organically grown and started with Family Sharing Without Shame to now my business is called Sharing Without Shame.
Nice. And something struck me that you said in there, you went on this retreat, hiking up a mountain. You said everyone was in recovery. I was the only mother. And that's an interesting sort of spin on things, because a lot of times family members don't think of themselves as being in recovery. That's for those people, or that's for my loved one. They need to go and get fixed, or, take care of themselves, whatever it is, if they would just change. And I hear that resonance within your story as well. But this idea of, like, as a family member, I'm not going to say need, but certainly deserve and have available to you recovery. And so family members being able to say, yeah, I am in recovery, just as much as the person who may have been doing, as you said, IV heroin, kratom, alcohol, gambling, sex, food, shopping, whatever it turns out to be.
You're right.
But just noticing, as a family member, a lot of people don't even seem to consider, like when they come to the family workshop that I do, that it doesn't cross their mind that they're there to do anything except learn some skills to get their loved one better. Or how can I be supportive?
Yeah, give me the answer so I can go home and fix them, and then you people just go do your thing and leave me alone. We'll just move on.
Absolutely, yeah. And that idea of just moving on comes up a lot too, as I'm sure you're well aware.
Oh, very much. Yeah. And I agree with you that we are also in recovery. I'll tell you that with my son, 3 years into his recovery, he decided to go through the steps. Being a nosy, controlling Italian-Irish mother, I decided I wanted to find out what they were going to do with my son. So I found this woman to take me through the steps. And I went through them, not for the right reason, but I got the greatest gift. And I think everybody should go through it, because we have to start looking at ourselves, right? Because when we have somebody in active addiction, we're pointing the finger, we're shaming and blaming them, but we're not looking at the three fingers that are pointing back at us. I had a part in that toxic environment. I was showing up for every fight he invited me to. I was showing up and participating until I learned not to.
Absolutely. And something else you mentioned in there was this idea as a family member hitting bottom. People will say, well, the fill in the blank addiction, whatever, compulsive behavior, mental health issue, whatever it is, they're not going to change till they hit bottom. They need to hit rock bottom. And we usually assume this involves things like going to jail, being institutionalized in some way, all this sort of thing, maybe even dying, because some people die and then they're brought back and that's their moment of clarity. And then family members sometimes get frustrated because that person does all of those things and still doesn't seem to get better. There's a Mark Twain quote that says, a man carrying a cat by the tail will learn things he can learn no other way. But as family members, sometimes it's like we're watching people walk around holding cats by the tail, going like, when are they going to learn that thing? How scratched up do you need to be? And sometimes as family members, it doesn't cross our minds. Maybe I need to hit bottom. Maybe I need to hit that point where externally it may not look any different, but internally I say, I'm not going to keep going the same way anymore. I can't. I refuse, whatever it is. And you kind of spoke to that moment. And I wonder, would you mind maybe talking about that a little more? What did that look like for you?
I knew I had to do things different. And there was I don't know if it was a dream or this vision. Something happened one night and I just knew, and there was like this message that came through that what if he gets well and then you're toxic to him? So he says to you, Mom, I love you, but I can't have you in my life right now because you're toxic to my recovery. And until you find your own and stop your bad behavior, I can't be around you. And just that dream, I put on my roller skates because I never didn't want my son in my life. And I started reading, I started going to AA meetings, even though I don't have a substance use disorder, because I got to understand the process, the thinking of people who have the disease of addiction. And so I just did all kinds of different things. I learned to journal. I learned to pray in a different way. I looked at me. I started going internally. And what happens if we're open to receive it, because it's not a good time, some of our childhood stuff comes up. Because sometimes when we're reacting to our loved one's addiction, it's triggering something from our childhood or from our past. And so instead of responding, we're reacting out of our pain. So for me, it really started to like crack the eggshell open. I really dove deep working on me and changing who I was.
That is so beautiful, and good for you for doing that. So many
It's not
people,
fun.
no, people will say, well, like, hey, you go get fixed. And the subtext is, you go get better so that I don't have to. You look at yourself so I don't have to. I've even said sometimes, we don't mean to do this, but there's a part of us that is going to react badly if our loved ones change, even if it is change that we've been begging them to make. Some part of us is still going to say, wait, but if you go out of your normal behavior, then I'm not sure where I stand anymore. If you're not standing in the crazy square, then I'm not sure where I'm supposed to stand. Or as I told one young mother one time, she said, my husband still wants me to be his crazy wife, just sober. I said, watch how he keeps handing you the crazy card, because if you don't take it, he's left holding it. Now what?
That's right.
And so being able to recognize, as you did, like, hey, maybe there's some things I want to change. I love that it came to you as a dream. Just your subconscious saying, hey, check it out. There's something to look out for here. Don't get left behind. But that's a real life scene that I've seen play out for people.
Yeah.
They send their loved one to treatment and
Yeah.
their loved one starts to get better. And then the family gets nervous because I don't know what to do if you're not the identified patient of the family.
Yeah. And I don't have to fix you anymore. Right. We have to get to know each other as my son is in recovery, he's sober, and me as a mom who's doing the work. We have to find our balance all over again. So, when the family's impacted by addiction, everyone takes on a role. And so my role was the unhealthy helper most of the time. But sometimes I'd be the scapegoat or, we kind of shift a little bit. I always explain it that my son's standing on a chair with 3 legs and it's wobbly. And as this unhealthy helper, I'm in front of him and he has his hands on my shoulder. He has a good grip. He's the puppet master. I'm the puppet. And then everybody else is doing this dance around us, trying to get our attention. I'm hyper-focused on what I think he's doing wrong and what I want him to do. And I make his addiction about me because I talk about, I want this, I want that, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, when it absolutely is none of my business because his recovery is his. And then I had to look at my recovery and what does that look like? Take your hands off my shoulder, get a chair that has 4 legs, and you start doing you and I'll start doing me. And hopefully as we both heal, we come together and we can have a really nice relationship. But it takes work.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I can already kind of hear in the distance some of the audience members saying, but what if he doesn't get a chair with 4 legs? What if he keeps knocking legs out? Donna, it's easy for you to say that your son got in recovery. My son didn't get in recovery. My spouse, my parent, my whoever, like, what then? What do I do if they don't get a better chair?
Well, it's important to learn how to have a healthier relationship with a person who is emotionally unhealthy. And what does that look like? Well, it's different for everybody. So I'll give you an example. So I had a mom who it was her second marriage. Her son was homeless. And I want to say he was like 20, 21. And he was homeless near where she lived, but he wasn't allowed in the house. And she was sick over it. None of us want our kids to be homeless. And so she said, I don't know what to do. I just want to feed him. And so we had a conversation and said, well, let's figure it out. How can we make this work so it's a win-win? And so what we talked about was your husband said he couldn't come in the house. He didn't say he couldn't come on the property. And it happened to be summer. And she goes, right. And I said, well, do you have a picnic table or an outdoor table? She said, yeah. I said, then have your son over, make a dinner. Don't let him in the house, but you just break bread with him at dinner. And don't talk about his addiction. Don't talk about all that stuff. Talk about the fun times when he was a little boy, or remember a trip, or talk about the things that you did that were really good, but and maybe plant a few seeds of hope, right? And that's all you do. And you send them with, leftovers, and here you go. And as tough it is to watch your kid walk away knowing they're going to go live in the woods, but it allowed them to have a relationship that he didn't dread coming over because mom's going to beat me up because all she's going to talk about is my addiction. And eventually he found his way into recovery because she supported him in a way that was different, because our loved ones don't need us to blame and shame them. They're doing it all by themselves. They don't need us to piggyback onto any of that. I'll support you in recovery, but I'm not going to participate in your active addiction. But this is what I'm willing to do. This is how I'm willing to support you until you decide to go to treatment. Now, are there situations where you can't do that? Yeah. If they're violent or if they're dangerous to be around, then no, you can't do that. But you can always send what we call love codes, send a little heart or, that they know that you're thinking of them. And you don't have to have a conversation, but it just lets them know that they're still loved.
That's such an important point, because people sometimes will get well-meaning advice saying, it's got to be tough love. If you're mean enough to them or you cut them off, just like if you love them enough, which a lot of movies and TV, that's the theme, right? If you just love them enough, it's all going to be okay. Mental illness is cured, addiction goes away, all this kind of stuff, right? By the end of the movie, just because they loved each other. And I like that idea. It just isn't reality. In fact, really, if you love them enough, just as much as if you're tough enough, are both still based in the illusion of control. They're both still saying, if you play your cards right, they'll get better. And the illusion of control is exactly that. I mean, I have a whole episode just dedicated to the illusion of control because it's so easy to fall into it. But I do tell people, we don't have the power of life and death. We don't know if your loved one's going to get in recovery. We don't know if they're going to live. We don't know how long. But that's true of every human relationship you've ever had. We don't know how long it's really going to last. What we can speak to is, what quality of relationship do we want to have, given the cards that have been dealt and given our circumstances, whether it's just today or the next 50 years. We can say, how do I want to show up? So if I want to show up in a loving way, I love your example. Let me figure out a loving way to show up for my loved one that doesn't put me in danger, doesn't break the family boundaries, still shows my heart, and let go of the idea that it's going to change them. Because who knows?
Because, they need to be loved more, not less, right? Because isn't addiction a disease of disconnect? It's not about the drink or the drug. It's the why. Why do they need to self-medicate? What is that all about? And so I think if a person can get to their why, it's all healing on both sides. Why was I the unhealthy helper? Why did I pay off drug dealers? Why did I do this stuff? Well, you want to know a hard lesson I learned? This one was really irritated me. So I was on the governor's recovery task force for years. And this gentleman, he came on and he didn't have children. He was a person in recovery. I was there representing families. And he said to me one day, you know what's wrong with you parents? You do all this stuff to make yourself feel better. That's why you do what you do. And I walked away thinking, how dare you? You don't even have children. It took about a year for me to receive the message, and he was right. Because I wanted those hopes and dreams back for my son. I did. I paid off his drug dealers because I thought I was saving and rescuing him, and I wasn't. I was only helping his addiction. I was fueling his addiction. And so I think when we look at things that way, again, it's just finding that balance of how we can be in this relationship without doing any damage. When you talked about control earlier, control is fear. That's all it is. And it's not going to happen like this. It took me years. My son's, 17 and a half years in recovery. I've been doing this work a long time, and I still work on me. There's still stuff that comes up, right? We're all works in progress.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that. And you were talking earlier about, this is going to touch on all of our old stuff, all of our old patterns, especially the ones that we didn't know were there. It's going to bring them to light if we let it. And for some people, that sounds like a scary process. And it can be at times. It can be painful. It can be scary. It can be uncomfortable. It would be at times, seems like it would be so much easier to point the finger at somebody else. But we're not going to learn and grow that way. We learn and grow by looking at ourselves. But sometimes what we're healing from are really old family patterns. It's very rare that I have a client where they are really the first person in their family to ever struggle with anything like this through the generations. I've had more than a few clients who thought that. And then it turns out there's like great Aunt Betty that nobody talks about or something, right? Or sometimes one of the parents or one of the other siblings or a cousin, they're like, well, actually, I also blah, 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 blah. And sometimes the client's like, I had no idea. Nobody's ever told me about great Aunt Betty or Dad, you've never talked about like your 20s or whatever it is. But addiction by its nature is about 50% genetic, but there's not one gene, right? There's a whole suite of genes and how they interact, and it's super complicated. And as a result, it can skip a generation or two. And people can start to think like, okay, we beat the family curse. But you know what doesn't skip a generation? The family patterns. The idea that we need to rescue and fix for us to feel okay. The idea that all of our kids need to be humming along, looking like the Facebook version of themselves at all times. Otherwise, we're not doing a good job. Those are like addiction-related ideas or other mental health struggles or whatever the family has been going through, whatever the trauma is.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Addiction is most often a trauma response. But I also tell our clients, even if you manage to skate through childhood scot-free, no trauma whatsoever, you will have plenty of trauma by the time you come out of the other side of your addiction. Just by its nature is traumatizing. There's this famous study that was done and TED Talk and all this about this rat park where they like created a better life for rats. And then the rats didn't want to, use cocaine anymore.
Yeah.
I always want to say, did you start with traumatized rats? Because it's not a level playing field when I deal with my clients. There are probably people who become addicted who did not have a big trauma load, but working at treatment centers for the last 18 to 20 years, I can tell you pretty much everybody who shows up at a treatment center has some kind of trauma going on.
Yeah.
And I would say an awful lot of them have absolutely no idea.
Right.
They'll tell me, oh no, everything was fine. My parents were great. I'm like, it's not necessarily your parents. It's just life.
Well, here's the thing. I'm a parent, you're a parent, our parents, their parents. When we have children, our children are watching us grow up. We don't have it all together all the time. We try to, but we don't. And trauma doesn't mean that somebody beat you or, did all this abuse. It can be a teacher that said something. I'm a highly sensitive person. And so I thought they had a character defect because all my life, all I was told is you're too sensitive. Oh, let it go. I thought that was something wrong with me. And so that was a problem, which caused insecurities and all this stuff. So whether you have a substance use disorder or not, we all have the same stuff going on. It's just that some of us have better coping skills. Some of us don't need to self-medicate to make it go away. However, I used to like to shop a lot. So back in the day, when I look back, maybe I did have a little something going on, right? That was my mechanism to deal with my son's addiction or whatever. Go feel good, go buy an outfit and feel good about it for a minute. And then you're back right in the throes of stuff. But I think it's important for people to understand trauma doesn't mean, like somebody physically, mentally hurt you. It's little things that can build up. I found out, like, I had abandonment issues. I had a brother who had very bad asthma, was given his last rites at age 2 and age 5. So it was always in the middle of the night, they'd have to call someone to come get me. Here you go. Well, they're going off with my older brother in an ambulance. I'm an infant. I'm a toddler. That's abandonment. My parents left. That was a little bit of a trauma that showed up in my healing that I knew nothing about. So it can go so deep, and I'm probably going too deep, but yeah, it all shows up one way or the other.
Oh, no, you're not going too deep for this show. We're going to dive in there. Absolutely. And what a great example. And I have one in my own life. I was adopted. And just like the life-saving things to try to save your brother and preserve his life, this was a life-saving move. My birth parents were increasingly concerned that they were putting me in danger. My birth mother, she got pregnant at 19 pretty quickly out of a psych hospital, relatively experimental antidepressants. And then, of course, as soon as she's pregnant, we have to go off of all of that. It was not an easy ride. And she didn't do very well emotionally. And she probably did a better job than she thinks she did, but it was still a rough ride. And the point is, nobody had it in for me. Nobody was out to get me. They put me up for adoption in an effort to save me, to say, you can have a better life somewhere else. Just like childhood surgeries. People undergo childhood surgery, and an infant getting heart surgery saves their life. But their experience is just like you were saying, like, there's no way to really communicate to this little teeny person, look, we're saving your life here. All they get is, I thought I could trust you. You put a needle in my arm. I fell asleep. I woke up and my chest had been cut open. What's my first impression of the world now? How do I operate moving forward? And so there are some beautiful and life-affirming and life-saving things that are still traumatic. Or like I said, it could just be a million little things, a death by 1,000 cuts. My simplest definition of trauma is just things that we go through, and the impression we get is that we're less safe in the world. And that's it. And it's not what happened to us. It's our impression of it. It's our reaction. It's how we interpret it. And so much of the trauma work that I do with clients now is helping them to reinterpret trauma and look at it differently and say, yes, it happened. We're not going to change that part. But it didn't mean what you thought it meant. Just like your son's addiction didn't mean what you thought it meant. And it's so easy as a parent to take these things personally.
Yeah, it wasn't my failure. It was his journey for him to go on. But I do think sometimes that his addiction rocked my world for a reason, because I needed to take a look at me and work a recovery program and look at things I would never have done. When I realized I couldn't love him into recovery, I started to put that love for me and started to take a path forward of healing. And I became a Shambhali Reiki master and started going into, the spiritual realm and doing energy work. And so I think everything happens for a reason. We just don't always know until we know.
Yeah, and that's an interesting idea. And I know some people in my life who like bristle at that. Everything happens for a reason, or God leads you to it, he'll lead you through it, or things like that, where they're just crawling up a wall. I don't know if I'm enlightened enough to say it happened for a reason, it didn't happen for a reason, but I can definitely say we can make meaning out of it. We can give it a reason and say, okay, yeah, from this, I learned so much about myself. And this is a subject I'm actually kind of passionate about. And it's the subject of my next book that I was pecking away at before I jumped on the interview here, is looking at this idea of like, what are all the gifts that I've gotten that I would not have gotten if this seeming tragedy had not happened in my life.
Right.
And I've had people come on this show who lost their loved one. The recovery didn't happen, or it was on and off, and one day off was all the way off. And yet still they can look at that and say, I grew so much, and I maybe love them even more now. And I didn't think that was possible. And I can love myself more and be more loving to the people around me, even though I didn't know that was possible. And while nobody would choose for that tragedy to happen, nobody would say, oh, it's a good thing it happened. We can look and say, I can make meaning out of it and turn it into something beautiful.
Yeah, we either use, stinking thinking or we look at the positives. We get to choose how we move forward with it.
Absolutely. And so one of the ways that you moved forward that you've referenced now is in creating the work that you've created to help other family members heal.
Mhm.
And I wonder, obviously within the limits of anonymity and all that sort of thing, would you mind talking about some of the things you've seen and experienced in doing that work?
Oh, so much heartache. I ran family support and I would have anywhere between 15 to 40 parents show up. And we did have some deaths, which is, horrific. But we would honor that person. I remember the first time that one of our moms, her son died. And it was a situation where she couldn't have him in the house anymore, but she didn't want him to be out on the streets. She goes, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, pitch a tent in the backyard. You'll know where he is. That might make you feel better." And so she did, and that's where he lived. But he ended up passing. And so what we did for her is I had a prayer shawl made for her. And then we all stood around her with our hands on her shoulder and we just prayed for her. And as he moved on to the other side, and hopefully that gave her the strength to move forward without him. And so we would do stuff like that. So every once in a while, I would allow the adult children to come to a meeting if I had a speaker that I think it was important for them to hear. So this particular night, this person came, but on the way home, this person started beating the mother up because said they were triggered by the conversation, which was like, no. And this person lived at the parents' house. And so they would try to get her removed. What we learned is in the state of New Hampshire, and I think there's a lot of states, that if you have an adult child living with you and their mail comes to your house, you can't get them out. So what we do is a contract. And so they become a guest or a tenant at will. And whether you charge them like $5 a week or $1 a week, I don't care what it is, but you will have an amount. So now you have a contract. So if they start abusing you, that you can have them removed and you might not be able to evict them, but you can eject them. So that's important for parents to know and look in your state to see what your laws are. Eviction versus ejection when you have adult children living in your home.
I've never heard that one before. Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, now I kind of imagine an eject button that you push and go to the house. But
Yeah.
sometimes it is necessary to do that. And when we talk about letting go of the illusion of control, that does not mean that you can't have boundaries. You don't have control over what they're going to do, but you have absolute control over what you're going to do. And I would say boundaries aren't about telling people what they can't do or what they can do, but it's telling them what you're going to do. And so being able to set those clear boundaries and then follow through with them and enforce them. And where it's difficult, do that emotional work so that you can model good boundaries, just like you're probably hoping they would have, right? You probably wouldn't
Yeah.
want your kid to get beat up. You shouldn't allow it to happen to yourself.
Right. Yeah. And with the contracts, this family contract, it's individualized, but it's a 3 strikes you're out policy. And it's always, you're going to do a drug test. And if it's positive, here's the consequences. Go to treatment, or I'm going to take the door off your room and you lose your privacy. The second one, go to treatment, or you always give 2 choices and let the adult child or the teen choose which one, because then they can't come back, and say, you made me do this. No, I didn't. I gave you a choice. You picked which one you wanted. So I think that's something really important too.
I like that. And I wonder, in the course of your work, you've probably also seen some really amazing, wonderful things happen too.
The miracles,
Let's talk about those a little bit.
the miracles of recovery. My son's a miracle. There's this one young lady who, oh my God, I did not think she was going to make it. She was sex trafficked. She was beaten. You name it. She went through it. And parents had hit there enough. And the last resort, she wanted to go to a treatment in Florida and ended up getting into a bad situation, called the parents and said, I want to come home, like 4 days later. And they said, we just sent you. That was all the money we had. We love you, but you got to figure this out. we'll support you in your recovery, but we're not going to participate in your addiction anymore. And by the grace of God, she called Teen Challenge, which is not for teens, it's for adults. And they sent her a plane ticket to Massachusetts. And this young lady has been in recovery for, I think, 3 years now. She got married. She's holding a job. She's getting custody back of her son. She is a blessing and she is a miracle. And they happen all the time. But the sad thing is, the media doesn't talk about the blessings and the miracles. They want you to see somebody with a needle in their arm. They want you to see the doom and gloom of addiction. And they don't show you the good side of it. And I have a book I wrote called Sharing Without Shame. And there's 6 parents who talk about how they navigated their loved one's addiction. And then there's 6 people in recovery that talk about their pathway to recovery. And they're all miracles. One woman, she wanted to kill herself. She went head on to a tree and ended up in the hospital and in a psych ward. And today she has her children in her life. She's a grandmother and she's working a wonderful program and she's healthy and happy. She's a miracle.
Absolutely. Everybody in recovery is a miracle.
Yeah.
All right, that seems like a great place to take a break. And after a quick word from another one of our sponsors, we'll have the rest of our interview with Donna. Among our sponsors, the most important one is you. We're just so grateful for your support on our mission of helping families find recovery. Here's some ways you can help. If you know anyone who could benefit from our message, encourage them to listen and subscribe. Hit that like button. We are so grateful for all of our subscribers on Patreon. So if you were able to support us in that way, we are so incredibly grateful for you. You can also check out any of my books. We've got Realistic Hope, Family Survival Guide for Facing Alcoholism and Other Addictions. We have the trilogy based around my book, Mommy's Getting Sober. Those are children's books, which are great to spread that message. And each one of the books also includes a guide on how to talk to kids about addiction. And also have my book, Spirituality for People Who Hate Spirituality. Please tell a friend, spread the word on social media. Let us know what we can do to help. Feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate each and every one of you. We could not do this without you. All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and finish up that interview with author Donna Marston. You know, it is miraculous that there's anything we can do because for most of human history, there wasn't.
Yeah.
This was just a hopeless condition.
Yeah.
And, you know, doomed for, as they say, jails and institutions and death. And some of our clients at the treatment center don't recognize when we say institutions. Back in the day, they weren't talking about cushy treatment centers. They were talking about sometimes lifetime commitment to an asylum. That was going to be your life from here on out.
Yeah.
Because nothing else was working. So the idea that, you know, within the last just under 100 years or so, we've come up with some solutions that can actually stick for people. What a miraculous time to be alive and to be able to be part of the process as you are and as I've been blessed to be. And I think about in the family workshop I've been running now for 7 years, a little over, just the number of miraculous things that I've seen happen. And the miracle isn't always the person gets sober and they live happily ever after.
Right.
Because you're right. In the media, there's one of 2 options. Either the person gets sober and lives happily ever after, or, and this is even more common, they get sober and then we just got to put that relapse in the script, man, because people want to see it. Show me a character who shows up in addiction recovery at the beginning of the script, and I can almost guarantee at some point in that script, they're going to relapse because script writers feel like that's what you got to show. People want to rubberneck the car wreck. But I get to see those miracles every day of the people who come in. They were a client at the treatment center. They're there with their family. They're doing some family work. No one's really sure about it. It's a struggle. Light bulb comes on for somebody, and that could be anybody in the family. Who knows? It could be one of the other kids we work with, all sorts of situations. So it's not always parent-child. I have this really cool group of men right now who are married to clients we have at the treatment center, and watching these guys each week, one by one, start to say, okay, I decided to try my first recovery meeting, and I got an Al-Anon sponsor. And after a little bit, he said, you should probably go to AA too. So now both people in the relationship are sober. And then somebody else in the group saying to the other guy, so now I started seeing a therapist, and man, I'm doing EMDR. All this stuff is opening up for me. Who knew, right? Your wife goes to treatment. You don't think, oh, I'm going to end up in therapy and my life's going to open up. But that's what's happening. And the third guy is saying like, okay, guys, man, can I get your phone number? And I'm just watching these miracles happen in real time. right in front of me.
Yeah.
And then fast forward a couple
Yeah.
years, and sometimes that client comes back and starts to work at the treatment center. And I was talking with our director
Yeah.
of admissions just yesterday, and we were looking at each other and we were counting sort of on our fingers how many different departments at the treatment center have at least one person who 2 years or more ago was a client. And now you talk
Yeah.
about, like, you're right,
Yeah.
get the custody back, work in the field, contribute. You're not just like managing to function in society, but you are actively helping other people. And getting to
Yeah.
watch that thing, bear witness to that miracle. I don't know about you. That's what keeps me coming back. That's why I do this work. It's so
Yeah.
amazing.
You're paying it forward, right? And it
Absolutely.
goes full circle.
And to recognize you don't need your loved one to change, get sober, or heal in order for you to do that. That's
Right.
not the moral of the story. It's the
Right.
idea that you can take control of your own destiny without trying to control somebody else's.
Yeah. Putting that control thing down is really difficult. It took a long time because I know for me, I didn't know that my control was fear. I thought it helped him. But what I learned the hard way is that I was allowing him to be comfortable in his addiction while I walked on eggshells. It was hurting him as much as it was hurting me.
What a profound thing to be able to see it, to be able to
Mm.
reckon with it. And I know emotionally that's not an easy journey, but be able to come to terms with that and then implement it in your life and then show other people how to do the same thing.
Right.
That's really what it's all
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. This whole thing happened organically, but I never wanted another parent to be emotionally and financially depleted like I was. That I couldn't tell you a feeling. I was so numbed out. I couldn't tell you what I felt. And so, going back to that emotional scale, I ended up printing that out and putting it in a frame. And every day I looked at it because I knew being number 22, I was not in a good place. And so I would work at working my way up. So it was like, oh, anger, that's number 17. Maybe I have some anger inside me that I'm not being honest with myself about. And I took a pillow and I just beat my bed and I let this rage come out of me. Like, how could this happen to my beautiful boy? And so I would have to, constantly look at these different feelings. And today I live by this emotional scale and I keep myself between 1 and 7. Number 8 is boredom. And this applies for people with a substance use disorder as well. As soon as any of us get bored, all bets are off that we're not going to start trickling down to our bad behaviors. And that's where your reoccurrences, your relapses come in, right? And guess what? People who are the unhealthy helper, the codependent enablers, whatever you want to call us, we have relapses. Our behaviors mimic each other. We do the same stuff, only I'm not self-medicating. It's the only difference.
Or it looks different. The self-medication might come from, let me try and control someone, or
Yeah.
shopping, or food, or whatever it is for a given person.
Yeah.
And I want to take just a moment and really honor something that I just watched happen, Donna, when you said, how can this happen to my beautiful boy? And I could see a little bit of the emotion still hit you right in the heart. And do you mind talking about that for a second, just so people know this isn't like a one and done, cross the finish line, never have to feel again, but that this is part of our ongoing journey?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sometimes I just talking about it because I feel other people's pain. I'm sorry. I just, I hate to see people go through it, but we have to in order to be able to move forward. And when I think back of those times of what he went through, it makes me sad, you know, but that was his journey. He needed to do it. And I'm a sensitive mom. And I just love him so much that I just wanted everything to be perfect for him. And so we all came to a place of imperfection and we moved forward and we learned how to love and how to, be in each other's lives. And we restored our sanity, our health, our relationship, and all of that comes full circle. Not all the time. And it doesn't always have to. Again, we have to figure out how to be with unhealthy people in a healthier way. And so all this emotions, just stay in tune, stay in touch, and let this stuff come up and come out, because that's how we heal. That's how we get better, when we can be open and honest, and I can be vulnerable to you and your audience and let them know, yeah, my son's sober today. Doesn't mean that some of that pain doesn't still come up when I talk about it, those memories, you know?
Absolutely. And it's so beautiful. And I think about what you mentioned closer to the beginning of the interview. You used to think it was a character defect to be sensitive. And you're
Yeah.
told, oh, you're too sensitive. And it's still with you today. And it's a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
because some of the best people that I know are sensitive people. And I will say for myself, as a person in recovery, when I got into recovery, I was afraid I was a sociopath because I was so out of touch with my emotions. I thought they weren't there. And
Yeah.
about 6 months into recovery or so, something happened and all of it hit in a rush. And it
Oh,
was just pouring out of me.
oh, I
And
bet.
and it took me years of recovery, including recovery fellowships, therapy, my own spiritual work, all the things, to come to the conclusion that I've always been a sensitive person, that I was
I
a highly sensitive kid who maybe didn't know how to deal with that.
I think a lot of people who have a substance use disorder, especially men, because, growing up in like baby boomers and so I think it's easier today, but a lot of the generations, boys don't cry, toughen up, don't do that. And so you weren't allowed to show your emotions. If you did, oh, you're a big baby. But I think there's a lot of people who are in recovery or in active addiction who are empaths or empathic, and life is hard for them because they're so sensitive, and that's why they self-medicate.
Yeah. And I love what you said, kind of speaking to that message of you can't cry. And it's true, you say like you can't show emotions. Well, you're allowed to be happy and you're allowed to be angry. And
Right.
that might
It's
be all
so
of it, right?
much. Yeah.
And then if you're raised as a girl in that same time period, and still for a lot of people, these are the resonant cultural messages, is angry is the one thing you're not allowed to be. You have to smile and put it on. And one of the theories on depression, which I personally subscribe to because I see it happen for so many of my clients and people that I know and love, is that depression often involves elements of anger that we suppress. And
Mhm.
so many girls, I think, are raised to suppress whatever anger they have. And they go through some things that warrant anger, right? Well, 100%, like I'd be angry if that was me. And they're told like, oh no, you got to be a pretty little flower. You go in the bathroom and clean that up and come out. You can have a smile on your face.
Mhm.
We end up with a lot of women who are depressed.
Oh, and add this to the mix. The first thing we're given at, what, a year, 2 years old is a baby doll to nurture. We're taught to be people pleasers, take care of everybody but ourselves.
Absolutely. And then you fast forward 20, 30 years, your kid's in trouble, your spouse is in trouble, your parents in trouble, and somebody says, don't be so sensitive. And why do you have to take care of everybody? It's
Right.
like, this is all we taught you to do. Sorry about that.
I did a piece on the generations of addiction. And, like my grandparents are from a generation where you don't make waves. Don't make waves. The baby boomers, we're from a generation kids should be seen but not heard, right? And then it keeps lightening up as the younger generation. I think they openly and willingly will talk about their mental health issues or their addiction much more than any of the other generations, right? They're more of an open book when it comes to seeking help than the older people are, because God forbid.
Yeah, absolutely. And one argument for that, not to go too far in the sidebar, but it is of interest that I've heard from somebody who'd been running a counseling center at a college for decades and said it was the American with Disabilities Act that all of a sudden made it easier for kids to get therapy. So by the time they became adults and by the time they got to college, it was just normal. Like, oh, you're feeling some emotional stuff, go talk to a therapist. She said this generation that hit, and ever since, kids, she said, are just way more willing, young adults, way more willing to just show up and say, yeah, can I talk to the therapist? Which, as a therapist, I'm going to say, what a great thing that
Well,
this is
yeah.
happening.
Yeah, because, the generations thought, you don't go talk to somebody about your problems. You just be a good girl and stuff it. And so that's why you see people like eat, they're bulimic or, all kinds of.
The beautiful thing is that people like you and people in the helping professions and people in recovery are all changing that narrative to say that it can be different, and we can demonstrate it partly through our practice and partly through our own lives. And it's that example. And so with that, we're going to start moving towards wrapping up. And Donna, let our audience know where they can find your work and how can they find out more about you or get a hold of you if they wanted to.
So they can reach me at Donna, Donna, the number 4, support, the word support, at Comcast.net. Visit my website at www.sharingwithoutshame.com. I have books on Amazon, Peeling the Onion, Just for Today, Sharing Without Shame, and then there's a journal, Healing Without Shame. And I have workshops. I have a free Family Sharing Without Shame Facebook page. It's a secret page. Not a lot of activity, but every once in a while, if someone says, hey, I need this, they'll hop in. There's probably 300 or 400 people in there. And then I do a lot of blogging. I have a lot of content. It's interesting to see where it started to how it's evolved, where we didn't talk about the healing piece for a long time. And to all your listeners, that's the number one piece, is when we want our children and our loved ones, our friends, whatever, to heal, be great examples and start doing the inner work ourselves and lead by example. And hopefully they'll follow your lead.
Absolutely. And I would say to anybody, whether you're the person with the addiction or the person who loves the person with the addiction, the most powerful thing you can do for the people that you love is to work on your own recovery.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And mind your own business.
That becomes part of working on your own recovery.
Yeah. My son's recovery is his, mine's mine, and everything will be okay as long as you put one foot in front of the other. And for all the moms out there, remember to breathe. We have a tendency to hold our breath. I used to catch myself holding my breath. Just remember to breathe. And sometimes, this saying, just for today, sometimes it's one breath at a time to get through the day.
Absolutely. What a beautiful conversation, Donna. I've enjoyed talking with you so much and having you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Addiction and the Family. This program is recorded, produced, written, floor swept, the whole bit by myself and my wife, Kira. Just so happy to have you with us. If you'd like, you can always look us up on Facebook. We are tweeting on Twitter, whatever they're calling it these days. And we can be found on Instagram. We can be found on Blue Sky. We can be found on Pinterest. So visit caseyauthor.com and just know that we are so appreciative of you and your support. Hit that like and subscribe. Let us know what you think. Feel free to email us anytime at addictionandthefamily@gmail.com. Take care till next time.